All right, guys. Whoa, it's a little loud. We're going to get into the next presentation, which is me. And I'm talking about the US telecommunication system. It's more vulnerable than you think. It's pretty interesting. So, who am I? I'm Will Dandrade. I'm the head of research from the best state in the whole world, New Jersey. I'm a red team offensive security focused guy. You know, I like cooking, anything culinary, soccer, bowling, hockey, baking, coffee, and hiking, all stuff that I love. I'm a radical hummus lover. Wait. Yeah. And I spent roughly 25% of my income in 2024 on coffee brewing equipment. I'm kind of ashamed of that. I'm sorry. And I'm a future General Dynamics intern. I just signed today. Pretty excited. Let's go. So, I guess what network security. So, I guess what I was really trying to get into by looking at this is thinking a little differently, because oftentimes in club, we're going to be thinking about vulnerable services, vulnerable software, the local networks, the stuff we have control over, because I mean, that's what we have control over. It makes sense. But in many cases, the infrastructure and other services surrounding what we can control may also be incredibly vulnerable. And that's kind of what I wanted to get into. So something that kind of prompted me to go into this is Salt Typhoon, which was a attack that had information more released about it in like December of 2024. Basically, it was a Chinese state-sponsored attack on the U.S. for U.S. counterintelligence. U.S. officials call it the worst telecom hack in history, and it began in 2022, targeting U.S. telecom networks like AT&T, Verizon, Lumen, etc., and compromised 9 of them, using known vulnerabilities in the routers, switches, and other products that they use. And this allowed them to steal call records, messages, surveillance data. It basically gave them to full access of all the telecommunications. And it targeted government officials, 2024 election candidates, and honestly, it's pretty crazy that this is something they were able to do, just get 9 telecom providers. It's insane. And personally, this was shocking for me, and it seemed like it was too easy. Those weren't some like extraordinary 0 days that they were able to get into or some crazy social engineering. It was literally just known vulnerabilities and basically getting into these companies. And this got me thinking, how else could our telecommunication system be vulnerable? Because obviously, if this sort of thing is happening, can we really trust everything about it? And in going into security, I always heard people say that SMS 2FA is bad. And I never really knew exactly why people said that. I always heard SIM swapping and things like that, but I wanted to dig more deep into it and figure things out. So the main culprit, I'm gonna need to get my water. So the main culprit when it comes to mobile telecommunications security issues is SS7. This is a global telecommunications protocol that allows mobile networks to exchange information needed for calls, texts, and roaming. It uses addressing to identify networks, and this is called global titles. SS7 kind of has a walled garden approach to security, giving you access to everything once established inside with a GT. And the GTs are delegated so commonly now, even it used to be a much smaller pool of GTs out there back in the 70s, 80s, back when it was first created. But now telecommunications is so big and all these companies have so many bands and things like that, that they're also owned or even leased to untrustworthy groups, hacked or bribed. And you can buy a GT lease it for a GT for only a few $1,000s a month, which is pretty crazy given how much access that can give you. So what is SS7 used for? This is just kind of to paint a picture. It's used for data while roaming. It's used for exchanging messages in between cellular networks. It's used to initiate most of the world's public telephone calls. It's used for data on 2G or 3G networks and used for backwards compatibility on 4G and 5G networks, and an enormous portion of telecommunications. So with all of this in mind, how old do we think SS7 is? What do you say, James? 20 years old? What about you? What about you?
Older than Anthony.
That's actually
More than 200.
more than 200? Okay. So it was made in the 70s. It was implemented in 1984. As you can see, it was made before the World Wide Web. And this is what a lot of our cellular communications are going over. Anthony was born. Then SS7 was used. Then the World Wide Web was, and then Playboy Cardi was born after SS7, which is pretty crazy. Puts everything in perspective when you think about it like that. So attacks. I'm gonna get a little bit into a couple attacks, and just don't do them because the FCC wouldn't like it. And if you want to do cool wireless attacks, just attend Wiggles. They meet Thursdays, 5:30 p.m. and they spend more time searching for gifts for announcements than doing things that are productive. But it's okay. So, just for a simple SMS man-in-the-middle attack, as you can see here, where's the attacker? Here's the victim. The attacker is going to register a fake mobile number on a mobile switching center, which allows you to intercept mobile communications. The home location register, think of it as a database that kind of makes routing decisions for mobile networks. And you'll set the new location for the victim's mobile phone number as your MSC, which will redirect traffic through your MSC that you own now. And the real home location record requests the legitimate MSC to release any memory. So basically, instead of routing it to the client's phone, it'll route it to you, the attacker's phone, which is the whole goal here. So that's the setup. It's pretty simple. And then how do we man in the middle it? All we got to do, the victim's bank is going to send them an SMS for like two-factor authentication. And the real, excuse me. And the real mobile switching center will translate that SMS to the SMS center, which is going to handle the SMS routing and forwarding. And then this will ask the home location record for the victim's location, which is now our location, our fake malicious MSC. And then the home location record replies with our malicious address, and it gets redirected to us. We intercept it, and the client, the victim, they don't even get it. They have no idea that this is happening the whole time. It's a pretty cool attack. Sometimes when you're doing a man-in-the-middle attack, like it varies per network because of the ways that their firewalls work, but some networks will block suspicious activity if you don't have the right IMSI number, IMSI. And IMSI is basically a 9-digit number that uniquely identifies each mobile user and is attributed to each SIM card. And remember how I talked about how easy it is to get SS7 access to a GT? Well, all you need to do is send a routing a send routing info command from an SS7 network, and then you can collect the IMSI number of any phone that you want on that network, which is pretty cool. It's not super hard to do. And there's also another way to go about getting IMSI numbers, which is by using stingrays. This is pretty cool. I feel like the Wiggles interest group could do this at some point. And if you don't have the bread to get an SS7 GT, you could also get an IMSI catcher, and these mimic legitimate cell towers and will intercept cell communications and collect IMSI numbers, and then these can be used to intercept communications and track users as previously discussed. And even if that's too technical for you, there's SIM swapping, which you've probably heard about, and eSIM cloning. SIM swapping, you basically social engineer the mobile carrier customer service and convince them to swap the victim's number to a new SIM, and this is often by using personal information they've gathered. There's also eSIM cloning, where the attacker requests the carrier to deactivate the victim's eSIM and transfer it to a new eSIM profile. It takes a little bit of social engineering, but it's fairly simple in practice, and you now essentially have the essence of a man-in-the-middle attack, except it's a lot more traceable. It's a little louder, but it's just as effective, and it allows you to send and receive, which is also interesting. And guess what? Another cool thing is that you can actually spoof SMS and caller ID really easy. All you need to do is download an app, and a lot of them will do it. A lot of third-party services will have like paid subscriptions for caller ID spoofing, things like that. And that's because caller ID spoofing has legitimate use cases. Companies often use it to display a single recognizable number instead of multiple numbers. Basically what this is, when you send an outbound call, you can just change the number that it's coming from, and you can try to pretend like you're some other caller ID even though you're really not. And just last week, a recruiter called me. I missed that call. I called that number back, and it was the general number for the entire company. It's very common in businesses. It's used all the time. And there's hundreds of caller ID spoofing apps and services out there, and all you need to do is really set it up, and you can spoof your caller ID, pretend to be someone else, pretend to be sending SMS messages from someone else. It's pretty simple. So how can this be used offensively? Now you can impersonate a trusted caller ID. With the power of machine learning, we also have realistic voice cloning. And this seems like it would be very effective for spear phishing. It's pretty cool. So an example exercise. We're going to clone Dan LaChance's voice. Basically, if you have a victim, a potential victim, and you know their phone number, you can pretend to be their caller ID. If there's someone who speaks publicly, like they have uploaded YouTube talks, other things like that, then you also have public access to their voice. And if you have someone's voice and you have roughly 10 minutes of training, then now you can clone their voice. So just getting into a little bit how we do it. We get the audio of your victim. You can use Audacity. I love Audacity. It's awesome. And you can truncate the silence. You can get rid of background noise. And this will be really easy for any like public figure or someone who uploads things where they're talking or giving a speech to the internet. And then now you just need to clone a Chinese GitHub repo RVC, and you use the web GUI to train. And you know, my GPU only got up to 70C and pretty good airflow, I guess. And yeah, my room got really warm. This took like an hour to train, but it was kind of cool just to see the results. Step 3, you're going to download every single Python package in existence for this next part of the piece, where you're kind of using your GPU to actually replicate the voice in real time. And then now I'm Dan LaChance. And it's easy except for the 30 minutes of like resolving Python dependencies and having, why do I have 6 versions of Python? This kind of made me lose my mind. There's so many versions of Python on my computer. And then we have some results. Let me see if the, let's see if the sound works. This is just a, I think so.
Hello, my name is Dan LaChance. I'm a second-year CSEC and CE major. I'm the wireless IG lead and tech lead. I was involved at the Yukon Voter Lab Research Lab, and I'm a skier in Rock Lab. I also love QR codes and am employed at a little place called Microsoft.
So yeah, that was basically me going over Dan's Who Am I slide. It's not super accurate, but it's pretty accurate. I was able to cobble that together in like 2 hours just at like 11 p.m. last night when I was like, you know, I want to do this. I didn't actually tie it into the caller ID spoofing part of it because like ideally it would have been cool if I could like, I don't know, socially engineer my roommate into like checking if yogurt's in the fridge from Dan LaChance's caller ID. Like that would be kind of cool to just do and see, get a proof of concept of. But yeah. Boom. Oh, we gotta go next slide.
Hello.
Okay. So yeah, the results, they were kind of meh. I'd redo it if I had more time. It was a pretty rushed demo, but within the context of receiving a spoof phone call where Dan LaChance is listed at the caller ID, you wouldn't immediately question whether that was Dan LaChance on the phone. And I think more distant friends, families, or companies that know Dan LaChance wouldn't question it seeing the caller ID. And the consensus is that it's pretty good, but not good for people that are close to Dan and know the way he speaks and is on the phone. And we all know how good this technology can be. We've all seen the AI Peter Griffin, AI SpongeBob on our like For You page or whatever, and the technology is advancing pretty fast. So this is actually a pretty big threat in the future if people can just spoof caller IDs and clone people's voices and just completely make you think that they're them. So the next piece is caller ID spoofing. I explained it earlier, but there's a lot of ways you can go about this. If you want a self-hosted solution, there's Stunt Banana, which works through AWS. You can set that up for a little while. Or there's paid services like SpoofCard that let you just use any phone number that you want. It's pretty cool. And the implications are, I mean, well, given 3 to 4 hours of your time, you can basically sound like someone and have their caller ID, which is pretty crazy. You see the caller ID and the voice matches, you will have incredible trust over what they say. You'll think it is the other person. This was a very like just chill example, just like a proof of concept, but real attacks could actually panic their victims and encourage them to provide sensitive or valuable information, like what Asa said in his phishing presentation earlier. Let's say you're an IT member and you spoof the boss's caller ID. You could say, we just had a huge ransomware attack while you're out of office. The password manager is inaccessible. What's the administrator password? We need it as soon as possible. Everything's flying apart. Maybe you're trying to target a grandma and get money from her. You could call from her son's caller ID and say, hey, I need money. I just got in jail. I need cash bonds sent to this P.O. box. You could really manipulate people using this, and it's kind of scary. And when you come from a trusted caller ID with a trusted voice, you can do a lot of what you want, really, when it comes to phishing. So what does this all mean? Just don't use SMS or calling for 2FA. It's easy to intercept, as we've seen. Do not trust telecommunications for security or integrity. Use Signal where you can or other encrypted messaging. Even iMessage is much better. Practice zero trust in every sense. As soon as data leaves your hands, don't trust where it's going. Don't trust where it's coming from immediately. If something seems fishy with SMS or a phone call, it probably is. There's so much out there beyond the scope of this talk. If you look at blog posts and dig where it interests you, there's a lot of cool stuff out there with mobile telecommunications. I just saw the Florida Institute for Cybersecurity Research just found like 119 vulnerabilities in LTE, 5G infrastructure. There's just like a ton of stuff out there, and it's really vulnerable, and it's infrastructure that we all rely on. A telecom system is so vulnerable, and it really revolves a lot around investigating incidents after they happen rather than preventing them, which is pretty interesting. Because caller ID spoofing is illegal when used maliciously, but it isn't just something that you can't do. You can do it, and like, there's a good chance you might not even get caught too. It's pretty crazy. Any questions? Is there yogurt in the fridge? I think so. I think so. Right, Luca?
Is that what you were like? Is that what you didn't respond to me?
What?
When I asked about yogurt in the fridge?
Wait, did you ask me about yogurt in the fridge?
It was like a week ago.
No, that was something else. I did all of this last night. I'm gonna be real. But thank you guys.